We are recording. Oh, I think I have to request permission from you, Aaron.
I've actually hit the record button already. You're good.
Okay, great. We've started recording. Let me ask questions really quick. Okay, so this is Willamette Week's endorsement interview for Senate District 14. We are joined by Kate Lieber and Harmony Mulkey. Did I pronounce that correctly? Is it Mulkey? Okay, yep. Great. I haven't met you before, so I didn't know. So why don't we get started with just a basic bio intro of who you are, why you're running for this race, that sort of thing. Keep it at about 2 minutes. Harmony, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so this is my very first jump into politics. I have a background in mental health, where I worked as a case manager with the foster care system at a nonprofit down in Salem for about 3 years before I had my second child, and the job didn't pay enough to keep me on. And so I loved the population I was working with, and we decided at that time to bring home the kids we were working with. So we started doing foster care, and we did that for about 3 years as well. And during that time, I just fell in love with those boys that we were working with, mostly through OYA, Oregon Youth Authority. Really that kind of lit a fire under me for what's going on in our foster care system. I also serve on the board of a nonprofit down in the Salem area for foster care and mental health. And what really kind of lit the fire for me politically, besides, having a heart for those kids and seeing kind of the inner workings of the system, was HB 3063 last year was huge. So that was the vaccine bill that was going through the legislature. And before then, I'd been pretty passive with politics. I mean, always interested in it from a cultural perspective, but not really involved in the local level at all. And that kind of changed everything, because it would have been the first time that my kids' education was being threatened. They would not have been able to receive an education at our private school or a public school in Oregon. So that got me started in my political journey. And from there, I met a lot of amazing men and women who were also passionate about, their topics of choice, and kind of got hooked up with running for state Senate. So it was sort of a last minute decision, because there was no Republican running in our district. And I thought, gosh, we can't let that happen. We have to at least have a good run at it. And I think I filed with about 3 days left before the filing deadline. I decided to file. And then the lockdowns went into place about a week later. So it's been a wild ride. But that's sort of my journey to here. So I am married. I have 3 little boys, aged 5, 8, and 9. And they are why I'm running. So.
Thanks so much. And I just want to clarify something. So on the voters pamphlet website, it says that you're a Republican, but also kind of libertarian. I'm wondering if you could explain sort of where you fall on that spectrum a little bit.
Yeah, so I align, I'm Republican through and through. Oh, we got another person.
Yeah, I think it's my colleague, Rachel Monahan.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So, and then I also won the cross nomination for the Libertarian Party. So we reached out and, basically they're endorsing me and nominating me to be their candidate as well. And I align with the Libertarian Party in the sense that I am all for smaller government and less regulation and less red tape, and kind of streamlining a lot of the bureaucracy that's going on down in Salem.
Awesome. And Kate, same to you. A brief intro about who you are and why you're running, please.
You bet. Thanks so much. So I grew up in Indiana. I was raised by a single mom after my dad died when I was 10. And I think one of the foundational things that you should know about me is that I grew up gay in Indiana in the 80s. And that was, really, I knew what it was really like to feel powerless and unseen, because I never really wanted to feel that way again. And because quite frankly, I didn't want anybody else to feel that way. It really motivated me to go to law school, which I did. It's actually where I met my wife. We've been together for 27 years. Moved to Oregon in 1995, and I became a deputy district attorney. I concentrated really mostly on fighting for the rights of children. I prosecuted child abuse cases, domestic violence cases, and juvenile. After leaving the district attorney's office, I received what I consider to be one of my battle scars, which is I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. I was 42. My kids were young. I've got 2 children. They're now 16 and 18, but then they were young. And, I saw our broken healthcare system up close and personal. And I carry that really with me because, no one really should be fighting to pay the bills while you're literally fighting for your life. While I was battling breast cancer, I got a call from the governor's office, and they asked if I wanted to join the Psychiatric Security Review Board. That's the review board that has jurisdiction over people in the state under a guilty except for insanity designation. And, I chaired that board for 5 years out of the 8 years I was on it. It really gave me an understanding of state government, how it works, but also a look into our broken mental health system. And it sounds like, Harmony, I have some similarities in really wanting to fight for the mental health of all Oregonians. And quite frankly, just as an aside, through COVID and with the wildfires, I am really concerned about the mental health of our citizens right now. I was really, after that, I rolled off that board, and I was really interested in the intersection of mental health and homelessness. Homelessness is really kind of one of our biggest humanitarian issues of our age. And so currently I joined the transition projects, which transitions 1,000 people a year out of homelessness into homes. And I currently chair that board. And it's really something that we're going to have to really pay attention to, especially as the moratorium comes to an end on our on rent moratoriums. But fundamentally, I'm a teacher at heart. I've been a teacher at Portland Community College in the criminal justice department, I think since I first started teaching there in 1998. So I've taught for many, many, many years. And those students, a lot of them is the first time they've ever gone to school, their first generation college students. So I take that very seriously. But the question, I think, is how did I get here? Well, Harmony and I share that we're first-time politicians. I consider myself to be actually an accidental politician because this was not the path I saw myself going down. But I was really first sort of drawn into it by the 2016 election. Look, Donald Trump being in the White House really have threatened so many things. And his promoting of bigotry and hatred while he is rolling back virtually every single right we hold dear, I made me really realize that our state government has to be strong, and it has to be ready. And it has to be prepared for making hard decisions and really fighting against the divisions that are coming out of Washington, D.C. But, even when that was happening, I thought we were okay in Oregon. I'm a Democrat. I'm a lifelong Democrat. We had a Democrat in the governor's office. We had a supermajority in the legislature. And then I really took notice when the Republicans walked out in 2019. That's when I really realized we might be more broken than I thought. So look, all my career, I have fought to equalize the imbalance of power. My core motivation is somebody who gets things done. I tend to chair almost every board I've ever been on. I'm a tremendously driven person. And, with the pandemic and the wildfires that have consumed us all, but the stakes are even higher. And really, it's about who's going to sit at the table and make really hard decisions. So I'm ready to do that. That's why I believe I'm the right candidate. And that's why I'm here today.
So we'll start with you, Kate, for the next question, since you're
Sure.
already talking. If you are elected to the legislature, what will your priorities be, or what's the first bill that you want to get passed?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my priorities since really COVID haven't changed that much. I have always been passionate about making sure that everyone has access to healthcare, making sure that we have a robust education system for our children, and really making sure that we house the most vulnerable in our community. COVID, however, has created, of course, as we all know, these incredible budget deficits and these incredible just unbelievable ways that we are going to have to prop up our economy. So one of the first things that we're going to really need to do is figure out, how do we help small businesses? How do we make sure that we get our economy moving again? How do we open up responsibly and not recklessly? And how do we make sure that we continue to protect the people that are most vulnerable in the state? One of the first bills that I am hoping to introduce is a bill to really make it easier for those that are homeless with criminal histories to actually get housing. Because if we continue to create barriers for the homeless to get housing, we're going to continue to have the problems that we see on our streets today.
Thanks. Same to you, Harmony. What would your priorities be in the legislature? What's the first bill that you would want to introduce?
Yeah, so being a Republican and a Libertarian candidates, I really have. I'm really going to try to not put very much legislation forth. I think we have way too many bills, way too much red tape going on down in Salem, and my priority is going to be to streamline a lot of the bills that we already have in place. And so that being said, I do have issues that are very important to me, such as medical freedom. That is something that's huge on my radar. And I think we all know with COVID, there is probably coming legislation with vaccines. So it'll be on the top of my list to maintain medical freedom and freedom of choice and bodily autonomy for everyone in Oregon, which I think is really important. Also, foster care reform. I think, if it's a choice, like Kate said, there are huge budget shortfalls. And if it's a choice between raising taxes or cutting programs, I'm going to be a proponent for cutting programs. And that includes not programs that help, but the kind of the bureaucracy, the task forces, the commissions, the councils that have previously been appointed that are really ineffective and sucking money. And really streamline those programs so that we can get boots on the ground help for the foster care industry. And then thirdly, I'm a big proponent for school choice. And I think right now with COVID, parents are waking up to the reality that they're not happy with the public schools. They're not happy with the way things are going. They're not happy with the curriculum, and their children are not receiving the education and the services that they need at this time. And honestly, it's not just a COVID issue. The schools have been struggling for a while. So I'm a proponent of school choice, and that can look like a lot of different things. I think, from voucher system to education savings accounts and more charter schools, privatizing certain aspects of the school system. But I think the one that stands out to me would be the education savings account, and really working on a bill that would focus on getting tax dollars into the hands of parents who know their children and know their students and know exactly what they need, because education isn't a one size fits all.
So can I ask a little more about your involvement in what you're calling medical freedom? Is that a way you got into politics? I know there were a lot of women who were involved in past legislative sessions. Fighting against that. Is that how you got involved in?
It is, yeah. The organization Oregonians for Medical Freedom is a big supporter. I'm a big supporter of them. And that is really what lit a fire underneath me, was that threat of having my children's right to an education being removed here in Oregon. And so
you don't have, your children aren't vaccinated or aren't?
No, my children are partially vaccinated, all of them. We don't follow the CDC schedule. And that's under doctor's recommendations, and we work with our doctor, and I would fight for the right for every Oregonian to make decisions for their own bodies and their own children, with their doctors on those issues.
And so what vaccines do you consider unsafe at this point?
Well, at this point, we've stopped doing any vaccinations at all with our kids. We started on a slow schedule, and then we've moved to not doing any at this point. So I have a full list in front of me. I think
sorry.
No, I think all vaccinations carry some risk, some level of risk. because it's a pharmaceutical product, and even Tylenol, kills people sometimes. So there's a certain level of risk that everyone needs to be able to weigh. And where there's a risk, there has to be a choice. And, I think parents have the ability to think logically about these things. And like, for example, my oldest son has asthma, and the slow schedule recommendation was for him not to receive the pertussis vaccination when around the age of 2. And we went ahead and went against the recommendation on the slower schedule. He said we would actually prefer to him to have that pertussis vaccination because of his asthma. Whereas, his brother, on the other hand, if they got pertussis, I wouldn't be worried. I'm pretty sure they'd be able to handle it. So it's a case-by-case basis, again, not a one-size-fits-all. And I advocate for every parent being able to make those decisions with their doctor.
And what was I going to say? Oh, so how do you imagine? I mean, I think a lot of people in this country are waiting for a vaccine for COVID, and that the kind of pandemic life that we've been living will only end in this country because when we have a vaccination. How do you imagine that the pandemic will end in this country?
Yeah, I really despise that line of thinking. I think it's driven by the pharmaceutical companies who stand to make billions off of the production of the vaccination. I think there's always been families and individuals in the United States, for hundreds of years, who have decided to opt out of vaccinations, who decided they want to live a clean lifestyle, or maybe they're a crunchy granola mom and they've decided they want to stay away from all toxins. Like, there are people everywhere in the United States that choose alternative lifestyles, and I will advocate for each and every one of those family members to have that option. So as far as COVID goes, I know hundreds of people who will never take a vaccination. They've either had a child who has been injured by vaccines previously. They don't trust this brand new type of vaccination. I know it's like new DNA vaccinations that are coming through, untested, unproven, rushed through, and a lot of people who are skeptical of President Trump also do not want to take a vaccination that he's pushing through at warp speed, So I think there are people on all sides of the aisle who are skeptical and cautious about vaccine uptake.
Absolutely. There are definitely people on both sides of the aisle on that. Are you voting for Trump?
I am. Yeah, I voted for Trump in 2016, kind of just waiting to see what would happen, not really sure what we would get. And this time around, I'm voting enthusiastically for Trump. I really stand behind the policies that he has put forth. And I'm advocating for him 100%.
I realized you didn't quite answer my question of how do you envision
reframe it again. Opening for COVID.
Yeah.
I really don't know. I think we're going to have to sit back and watch how this goes, because I stand for freedom. I know there are people who just will not take a vaccine, and it's scary. It's scary times entering into, how is this going to look? What kind of coercion is going to be used? And we've already seen, like I mentioned, my own personal story last year at the state level in Oregon, using those coercive tactics, saying, and I was told the language, well, we're not denying your children an education. They just can't go to a public or a private school without their vaccinations. And that's coercion. That is, it's a disgusting tactic. And I believe we will see that being used with the COVID vaccine as well. Well, you don't have to take a vaccine. We would never mandate a vaccine, but you can't travel. You can't enter a public space. You can't be an educator. So these types of things I've seen already talked about. And I am very,
okay, but I get you don't want anyone to have to take the vaccine. What's the alternative? Like,
I think
600,000 American dead, like 3
I think the alternative.
How many dead people if we're not going to take the vaccine?
I think the alternative is to take the approach that Sweden has taken, which is opening up and building natural herd immunity. And
Herd immunity means a lot more dead people. Sweden has moved away from herd immunity.
so we have to open up. I mean, people die we are all going to die. And I think we need to take,
Definitely.
we're all going to die, not COVID, I'll tell you that. We need to take a huge a shift from focusing on locking down healthy people, shutting down businesses, no more schools, no more gatherings, really the destruction of society as we know it, and move towards protecting the ones who are really vulnerable, which are those in, convalescent care facilities, memory care facilities, our elderly population. And I think we need to be focusing a lot more on this group of people and getting them the support they need while safely reopening everyone else.
Thank you for those answers. Tess, you can get us back on track. Sorry to
No problem.
my own personal interest here.
And I'd love to answer some of the same questions if that's okay.
Do you want, I don't think I've heard your response to these questions before. So if you want to kind of respond to what your opponent was saying, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the thing. Let me just take the childhood vaccines first, right? All 50 states have vaccine mandates. And like all 50 states, we have a medical exception. That Oregon is no different. There is nobody that said we were going to get rid of the medical exception, right? So that's one thing. So that I think is a specious argument really about this coercion. And quite frankly, we know that individual decisions can impact the safety of entire communities, especially when we're talking about childhood vaccines, right? We know that we've eradicated measles and we've eradicated other things that have come back. And without getting all those vaccines, it's really, really important to understand that we're going to have medically fragile children who will die from diseases we can prevent. So again, we're not taking away a medical exemption to the vaccines.
Oh,
Let me now take
religious and philosophical exemptions as well.
There are non-medical exemptions currently in Oregon, which we still have, right? So
Absolutely.
I'm not going to get into a philosophical debate with you regarding vaccines or whether or not they protect children. You might personal choice versus protecting vulnerable children is really the kind of thing that we're talking about here. But let me talk about COVID, right? We're in a world of hurt. We all know that. COVID has taken away people's livelihoods. It has taken away people's lives. It has children at home, right? And we have to understand that is a huge hardship. But we're not going to get out of this by simply creating a herd immunity. I want to open up, but we have to open up responsibly, not recklessly. And that's why we have to follow science. Science is based on data. Science is based on facts. We know that you wear a mask, it will protect you and those around you. We know that when you practice social distancing, that will help. But sacrificing hundreds of thousands of people simply because we want to have our own personal choice is where I draw the line. And so I'm all about science. What I'm not about taking somebody's opinion, which is what President Trump puts out all the time, not based on science, not based on data, not based on facts, and puts people's lives at risk on a daily basis. So I'm ready to open us up, but I'm ready to do it responsibly and not recklessly.
I'm going to switch gears here, if that's all right with everybody. Moving on towards the criminal justice direction. And Kate, we can start with you since you were just talking, and we'll go to Harmony second.
Right.
In June, the legislature passed a series of police reform bills. I want to know, what was your stance on those bills? Did you think that they didn't go far enough? Did they go too far? In future sessions, how would you amend those bills if possible? Or what changes would you like to see?
Yeah, so we have work to do in the criminal justice system. And I think that we have to understand the criminal justice system has many parts to it, right? So when we're talking about police in particular, I think that we definitely need to make sure that we have rules so that police are acting appropriately. Look, I spent a lot of years in the criminal justice system, right? I mean, I have deep actual knowledge around sort of what's been happening in terms of police practices. And we do have systemic racism within that system. And that is something that we've had it for hundreds of years. We've also placed our police in a really, really precarious spot. We have defunded many of the social services, especially around mental health. We have pushed those people out onto the streets, and we have told the police to go out and deal with it. And I think that puts the police in a really precarious spot, and that's what's been happening. So I am all about making sure that we root out those police officers who should not be on the force. I am all about making sure that we give really strong parameters for the police who are on the force. And I'm also about making sure that we appropriately support them and give them the training they need to deal with the extraordinarily complex issues that are facing them on the streets today. Look, police have got to be here. We're not going to defund the police, right? Should we do a top down and figure out if we're spending the money in the right way? Absolutely. I'm all for that. I want to make sure that we don't waste any funds, but let's make sure that we're giving police the tools to really deal with what's happening on the streets. And what's happening on the streets is very complex right now. Now go to the other system.
Can I just ask one follow-up on that? And I'll, Harmony, and then we'll go to you. Would you support an outright ban on tear gas? I know in the last session, there was a loophole where police can use it in a riot. Would you support it just being completely banned, or do you like it the way it's designated currently?
I don't think there should be I don't think that we should take away that tool from the police, but I do think that we should put limitations on it.
Gotcha. And now we'll go over to Harmony. Same question. What was your take on those that series of bills that was passed? And then if you could also answer that tear gas question too, please.
Yeah, so I actually agree with Kate in a lot of this. I think that there is room for police reform. The officers that I've met while campaigning all almost 100% agree that there needs to be some kind of reform, and they welcome reform. All of them want to be doing their jobs better and more efficiently. And if they have, like mental health teams working with them, they are all for that. They would rather be focusing on other areas if at all possible. It is a complex issue. It's, we need to be supporting our police officers, giving them the tools and the training that they need so that they can be efficient. Defunding the police is not something that we can do. We've seen a rise in violence, gun violence here in Portland, 250% this September versus last September. There is a lot of room for the police to have more training, and I think the officers that I've met with agree with that and welcome that, and I would support police reform in those areas. Defunding the police, however, is not an option. And then tear gas, I support the use of tear gas. I think it's the most humane tactic in a lot of situations. I think shooting rubber bullets at people can be really damaging and leave really lasting impacts. And also, I'm new to the conversation, but just thinking through having to designate it as a riot in order to use the tools they have on hand, I think sets really dangerous precedent. And for people who are possibly arrested during that time, now they're facing riot charges. And I don't know if that gets bumped up. So I don't think having to designate it a riot is necessarily beneficial or helpful.
So you mean that now the fact that, because we've seen instances where police will say, oh, it's a riot, we have to use tear gas, whereas before in that same circumstance, they might not have necessarily described it as a riot. Are you referring to that?
Yeah, that's accurate. And, they might be designating something as a riot that doesn't need to be, just so they can use the tools that they need to, I would imagine. And I don't know if Kate has some more insight into that.
Great. Well, I know this is only supposed to go till 4. Do both of you have about 10 more minutes, or do you have to get going?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. I'll just try to keep it to one more question. at Willamette, we value people who can, think independently beyond just the party lines. So I'm wondering, for each of you, if there's an issue where you feel like you're willing to diverge on from the party that you're representing. So Harmony, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, specifically HB 3063 was supported by a lot of Republican candidates, and that's one area that I will stand strong in, is the area of maintaining medical freedom for every citizen in Oregon. And I wouldn't stand on party lines for that. That's something I'm known for, is being able to be a standalone on issues. So yeah, I mean, it would depend on the issue, of course, but I'm definitely willing to diverge from my party if needed. Mm-hmm.
And Kate, same to you. Any issues where you might diverge from your party?
Yeah, I can't at this point sort of play into a hypothetical in terms of like what I might be diverging from, but what my value proposition is that I am open-minded. I'm a learner. I listen to both sides. I think it is very important that we bring everybody to the table. And I'm a lifelong Democrat. I mean, I've been a lifelong Democrat for, well, my whole life. And so it really is one of those things, though, that I think this is all about who's going to be sitting at the table when unbelievably difficult questions are going to have to be answered, and how do we do that in a way that aligns with our values. So
here's a way to follow up on that. You mentioned that you saw the need for there to be you're in a Democratic stronghold. You need Oregon government to be functioning if the federal government isn't, in your view. So how would you rate how Governor Brown has done in the face of the pandemic?
Yeah, so again, I think history is going to judge her. I think that she's going to be on the right side of history. I think in many ways she's done really well with the pandemic. And remember, the pandemic is this movable, squishy thing, which we haven't even seen the end of it. So I think it's hard to give her a rating based on her overall thing of the pandemic, because we don't even know where it ends yet. But I would say she is doing very well in terms of following the science and the data. And the problem is that like getting at this pandemic is kind of like trying to hold on to sand, right? I mean, it's this ever shifting and ever changing. I think we know a lot more about it, but I have seen her be the leader that we need and have made really hard decisions. I mean, she shut us down pretty early in this. She's got good guidelines that if we follow them, I think that we would do much better than we're doing. I still go back to this whole thing is why we're not all wearing masks. I don't get it. I don't fundamentally understand why people can't understand that wearing a mask isn't for me, it's for you. And so I'm going to say that history is going to judge her, but I believe that she's done a pretty good job in a really difficult situation.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I love how you keep saying at the table, and I think there is room at the table for different opinions. And right now in Salem, there is a super majority, and we've been Democrat controlled for the last 30 years. So the Republicans really have no voice, and that's why I'm here. I'm here to give a voice to conservative voters. I'm here to give a voice to moms. I'm here to give a voice to, people who haven't had a voice in 30 years here in Oregon politics. So there is room for difference of opinion. And what we're seeing right now in Salem is not a difference of opinion. It's everybody falling in line behind one person, Kate Brown. She is leading. There has been no outcry from the Democrat Party saying, what's going on? Why are you not giving leadership back over to the legislature to do their job? She still is working under these emergency orders, and it's not okay. It goes against the law. It's not okay to see this be happening. So the way she's handled this pandemic, I think, is a huge overreach. She has overreached and has not given the voice to the legislature, although the legislature is completely Democrat and would fall in line. So I think this coming November, we need to have more Republicans in office so that there is balance in that conversation. We have to be able to go back and forth. And we don't do that right now. The only, you brought up the walkouts. The only recourse that the Republicans had was to deny quorum and walk out. That's all they had. They were not able to work with the Democrats. So I think it's important that we have to bring balance to the legislature, and that's what I'm fighting for.
I mean, isn't the counter argument that y'all are just bad losers?
No, quorum is in place for a reason.
Democrats won. They won right out. Win an election.
It's checks and balances. It's checks and balances. And
There are
it's
no checks and balances if you lose. You lost.
well, this year it's very important that we win because their redistricting is in line. So every 10 years we're able to redistrict. And it could be argued that redistricting the last decade really set up Republicans to lose because of the way the districts are gerrymandered. And I know if you look at our district, Kate, have you noticed that it's kind of the shape of a chicken? It's very odd shaped. It's got fingers into Portland. It's gerrymandered in order to keep this district blue, and it worked.
First of all, I'm going to I've got to push back against you. The Senate has not been controlled by the Democrats for 30 years, period. Also, look, if you're going to talk about why the Republicans walked out, they walked out over a cap and trade where they were at the table. In fact, that cap and trade bill got over and over again. They were given things in order to make sure that the Republicans stayed in the building, and they still left. It took timber trucks coming down the streets of Salem when timber had been excluded out of that bill. So Republicans were going to walk out no matter what was in that bill. And the Democrats have been working with the Republicans. My question to you is, will you stay in the building and do the hard work of making legislation better? Or will you walk out with the Republicans when it gets too difficult?
I 100% support what the senators did last year. And, if we have a quorum, that is built into our state constitution for a reason. And it is a legal recourse that we have to use.
But you walked out on all sorts. You walked out on all sorts of legislation. You walked out on legislation that would help with the wildfires. You walked out on legislation that would fund.
They came back to fund those bills. They came back, and the Democrats did not show up. The Democrats walked out that last.
Okay.
I have to say that after this, I don't feel that great about us in the state ever achieving like a bipartisan consensus, but I think we're out of time. Tess, do you want to ask?
Yeah, we are out of time, but we do have to ask our fun question that we've been asking every candidate. Since we've been doing Zoom and video chat for the last 7+ months, what's the most embarrassing or awkward or funny moment you've had doing these video calls? Harmony, we can start with you.
Well, I have 3 little boys in the house, and they're constantly running in and interrupting. So there have been several times when I have a little boy wanting to show me a Lego or tell me about his video game score while trying to work. So, they're a cute, welcome interruption sometimes.
Kate, same.
Yeah. Well, so I could think of the one time I have a COVID puppy. Like so many people, I got a puppy, and I didn't tell people that I was on this call with that I had a puppy, and they knew I had a 16-year-old son too. Well, I thought I'd hit mute, and I was screaming at the puppy to stop peeing on the floor. And when I got back, like somebody asked me, "Is your son okay?" And I'm like, No, I have a puppy. No, I have a puppy. I was not yelling at him about peeing on the floor. So that was, I had to confess because I didn't really want to tell people I got a COVID puppy like everybody else. But yeah, that was pretty funny.
Got it. Okay, well, thank you both so much for taking the time to talk with us. This is going to be out on Wednesday, the endorsement issue. So keep your eyes peeled for that.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All righty, bye-bye.